Depression is not a moral failing. I think we have to start there. It is not an imaginative weakness or, a lack of gratitude. We have to just discard those simple, almost judgmental explanations because they completely obscure what's really happening.
They really do. They obscure the physical reality of it. When we talk about conditions like chronic anxiety or depression, we are dealing with, well, with systems that have gone awry. These are states rooted in a neurologically evidenced disruption of the brain's chemistry, its regulatory circuits, and the systems designed to keep us stable.
And that biological reality is the bedrock of today's deep dive. We're going to cut through all the noise, so no motivational speaking, no discussions of faith or philosophy. Our mission is pure science. We're examining the measurable neuroscience behind sound-based practices. Specifically, how do ancient systems like the meditative practices our sources describe act as biological self-regulation tools? How do things like rhythm, breath, and specific sound patterns physically change the human nervous system?
It's fascinating because mental health is, at its core, biological. And what we're seeing now is modern neuroscience confirming these mechanisms that were articulated centuries ago. I mean, our sources show the principles of how specific sounds influence stress chemistry. That was all detailed in texts like Gayatri Vigyan, long before we had MRI machines or cortisol tests.
Okay, let's unpack that. Let's start with the chemical equation, segment one. The conversation around mental stability so often centers on neurotransmitters, right? Especially serotonin. And the modern belief usually is that if you have an imbalance, the correction has to come from the outside, from a pill.
That is the dominant model, yes. But it kind of overlooks the brain's own profound capacity for self-correction. The research now really suggests that these mantra-based practices offer a potent internal calibration tool. Consistent chanting, for instance,
Let's see where.
it's neurologically evidenced to improve the regulation of vital neurotransmitters, specifically serotonin and, importantly, dopamine.
So the practice isn't just creating a flood of new chemicals, it's more like optimizing the factory floor. Is it helping the brain produce more, or is it improving how it uses what's already there, the uptake and management of it?
It's mostly a management function, an improvement in efficiency, which then, supports production down the line. Think of it less like adding more fuel and more like optimizing the engine's timing. The rhythmic stimulation stabilizes the neural circuits responsible for that clean transmission and reuptake, allowing the brain to maintain its own ideal balance.
That makes the benefit feel so much more sustainable. But I think the most critical insight, especially for anyone listening who's dealing with stress, which is everyone, is the impact on cortisol.
Absolutely. Cortisol is the primary stress hormone. It's the chemical signature of your fight or flight system.
Which is great if you're, running from a tiger.
Exactly. You need it for an acute threat. But when it's chronically elevated, which is the state of constant low-grade stress most of us live in, it just wreaks havoc. We're talking chronic inflammation, a weaker immune response, digestive issues, terrible sleep.
And the sources we looked at, they mentioned research from the International Journal of Yoga, I think Dr. B.R. Sharma's work. It demonstrated a real impact here. How did they measure that reduction?
They often use salivary cortisol levels. It's a direct, objective measure of your stress chemistry. They'll measure it before and after a structured intervention period, maybe 8 or 12 weeks. And the findings repeatedly show a statistically significant drop in baseline cortisol for people who practice regularly. It's proof that the practice supports the brain's own inherent capacity to manage its stress response.
So the key takeaway for you listening is that this is a biologically active self-regulation mechanism. You are training your system. But, and we have to add this caveat from the sources, this is a powerful tool for stabilization, but it is not presented as a replacement for clinical treatment.
Precisely. It works as an incredibly effective adjunct, a support system. It stabilizes the underlying chemistry, which can make other approaches like therapy or medication more effective because the nervous system is just quieter to begin with.
Let's use that stability as our transition. We've talked about cortisol, the chemical signal, but stress isn't just a chemical, is it? It's a physical feeling. That racing heart, the knot in your stomach, the shallow breathing, that feeling of constant panic. And that brings us right to segment two, the nervous system stabilizer. What's the biological switch for calm?
And that switch really is the vagus nerve. This nerve is genuinely the superstar of internal regulation. It's the longest cranial nerve. It runs from your brainstem all the way down through your chest and abdomen, connecting your brain to almost every major organ involved in emotion, digestion, heart rate.
So it's the main line, is what dictates whether your body is on that high-tension fight-or-flight track or the relaxed rest and digest track.
Exactly. When you're in that constant state of sympathetic activation, that always-on state of modern life, your vagus nerve is underperforming. We call it low vagal tone.
And low vagal tone is linked to higher inflammation, less resilience.
Yes, but here's where the practice gets so compelling. The link between sound and nervous system regulation is direct.
How does rhythmic chanting physically engage it? How does it strengthen that nerve?
It's a combination of two things, controlled sound and controlled breath. The vagus nerve is physically routed right near your vocal cords. So slow, rhythmic vocalization, especially low-frequency sounds, creates this gentle internal vibration. You combine that vocal vibration with deep diaphragmatic breathing, the slow inhales and long exhales, and you are physically mechanically stimulating the nerve.
Whoa, so the sound isn't just a mental focus point, it's a physical tool.
It is a physiological command. This stimulation enhances vagal tone. It's like tuning a guitar. If your strings are loose, that's low vagal tone, any little knock throws the whole system out of tune, leading to anxiety. Rhythmic chanting effectively tightens those strings. It makes the whole system more resilient.
Okay, but that's a critical question then. If the core mechanism is just controlled breathing and vocal vibration, couldn't I just hum a low C for 20 minutes and get the same result? Why this specific mantra?
That's a great question. And yes, humming will stimulate the vagus nerve. Any prolonged, controlled exhalation will. But the specific structure of something like the Gayatri Mantra adds another layer of sophistication. It involves precise articulation, specific resonance points in the mouth, a defined rhythm. These elements lock the mental focus. It's the marriage of the physical stimulation with the cognitive anchoring that gives you the full effect. It stops the mind from wandering back to the anxious thoughts.
Ah, I see. So the mantra provides the structure needed to sustain the physiological action. And you're saying scientists like Dr. Shirley Tellis have confirmed this is measurable nervous system regulation, not just, feeling relaxed.
Exactly. We're looking at practices that physically shift the body out of that hyper-aroused state by actively engaging the parasympathetic nervous system.
It's real.
Which brings us to our third area, structural plasticity. We hear this phrase all the time. Meditation changes the brain. For years, that sounded like a nice metaphor. But now we know, thanks to modern imaging, it's a scientifically validated reality.
It's structurally confirmed reality. Thanks to neuroimaging studies from people like Dr. Andrew Newberg, long-term disciplined practices cause physically observable changes in the brain's architecture. This is neuroplasticity in action.
Okay, so if the goal is to build a more resilient mental architecture, what are the key hardware upgrades happening? There are two main critically linked changes. First, we see reduced density and reactivity in the amygdala. For the listener, the amygdala is the brain's alarm bell. It's the fear processing center that triggers fight or flight.
Right. The amygdala is running the show when you catastrophize or, fly off the handle at some minor stressor.
Precisely. And the second, parallel change, is increased activity and density in the prefrontal cortex, or the PFC.
The CEO, the Rational Oversight Center, the part responsible for executive control, planning, and emotional regulation.
And when you look at that interaction, the implications are just profound. The practice doesn't get rid of the amygdala. We need fear to survive, but it reduces the dominance of its automatic knee-jerk fear responses. By strengthening the PFC, you're strengthening the braking system. You're literally building the capacity to choose your response rather than being hijacked by instinct.
So let's connect this back to segment 2. If stimulating the vagus nerve creates that deep physiological calm, does that calm state then prime the brain for this neuroplastic change? Does being calm make it easier to rewire?
Absolutely. They're deeply interconnected. When the vagus nerve brings the system into that parasympathetic rest and digest state, the brain stops diverting all its resources to survival. That state of stability is optimal for neuroplasticity. The brain can afford to start putting resources toward higher order functions, strengthening the PFC because the chronic alarm bell is quieter. Calm is the prerequisite for rewiring.
So we've built a chain. Rhythm and breath stimulate the vagus nerve,
which quietens the physical stress response.
Which then structurally enables the prefrontal cortex to take command over the amygdala. It's the pathway to self-mastery.
And this is where we connect all this modern validation to historical insight. This whole idea was articulated decades ago by Pandit Sharma Acharya or Gurudev, who observed these dynamics long before our technology could.
Right. His insight is that perfect synthesis. What was the core idea he offered that's so strongly validated by all this?
Gurudev stated, and this is the core of it, man's mind alone creates his heaven or hell. When right intellect arises, the gates of mental suffering begin to close.
Right intellect. That sounds philosophical, but we can translate that directly into the language of neuroscience now, can't we?
We can. We're talking about the measurable activity and structural integrity of the prefrontal cortex. Right intellect is the strength of your cognitive regulation. And neuroscience validates this perfectly. When the PFC strengthens, when that rational, higher-order control arises, psychological suffering diminishes. Because the source of that suffering, the chronic, chaotic, hyperarousal of the fear center, is literally being structurally managed.
It's the ultimate feedback loop. The practice leads to a stronger brain structure, which leads to less suffering, which leads to greater mastery. You gain command over your own heaven and hell.
Yes, the practice provides the disciplined training for the brain to achieve that internal resilience.
Okay, so let's tie this all together for you, the listener. Let's do a quick review to really solidify these three pillars of science-backed self-regulation we've covered.
These are the three spheres of biological influence you are actively harnessing.
Pillar 1, neurochemical support. This is your internal management system. Improved serotonin and dopamine regulation, and that critical reduction of chronic stress hormones like cortisol.
Pillar 2, nervous system balance. This is the physical shift, the enhanced vagal tone, which physically moves your body out of fight or flight and into a state of parasympathetic stability.
And Pillar 3, neuroplastic change, the physical rewiring. Reducing fear dominance in the amygdala and strengthening the rational regulatory power of the prefrontal cortex.
And the overall result of all this is a biological transformation. You are shifting your entire system from chaotic reactivity to calm, focused awareness.
Yeah.
And again, this isn't about mysticism. This is biological self-regulation through disciplined mental and physical practice.
It's so empowering. You are not waiting for something outside of you to fix your system.
Oh,
You're using the tools you already have, your voice, your breath, your focus, to empower your brain to heal, stabilize, and regain command.
Apply this knowledge consistently. Support your system and restore that balance.
So, since this deep dive has showed us with such clarity that using accessible tools like sound, rhythm, and breath can physiologically stimulate our nervous system, measurably rewire our fear centers, and influence our core neurochemistry, here's something to mull over. If the human voice and breath are such powerful, intrinsic, self-contained biological mechanisms for healing and stability, what other powerful, non-pharmaceutical, self-contained mechanisms might we be overlooking right now in our hyper-externalized world?